My name is Ariel Tseekwe. It means Thunder Woman in my language, Dene Sotlene. And I'm from the Treaty 8 territory in northern Alberta, the Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation. And I'm joined today with two powerful women that I want to offer the opportunity to introduce themselves in their own languages and really pay respect to them. But we have Beverly Jacobs and Jessica Bolduc. I'd like you to both introduce yourselves.
Miigwech Bev. Ani bojo kinawea, bidoya bamatsi benes nedijnakas, bawatin nedonjaba, makwayan dodem, ojiboy nishnabe kwayendao. Greetings, I'm really grateful to be back here. My English name is Jess. My Anishinaabe Moan name is the little thunderbird that brings good life. I'm excited to be here with some relatives of mine. I'm also Bear Clan from Anishinaabe, and my home is Bawatin, or Sault Ste. Marie. I'm a member of the Batchewana First Nation. We are a nation of Ojibwe and Anishinaabe people.
Thank you so much. You know, yeah, give a round. It's been a really interesting day and a lot of talk of reconciliation. I've sat on numerous panels, taken in a couple other ones as well. And what's really powerful about this panel in particular is having Indigenous women. Because when we talk about reconciliation, we often just think of a reconciliation of the wrongdoings that have happened in the past, but I also think we need to be talking about the power of women and this rise of the matriarchy and the women that's a part of this process of reconciliation, at least for me. So I just want to give a round of applause for these powerful women. So we're going to discuss reconciliation. And the first question I have for you, we watched this video just before this presentation before us, and it really talked about where we are with truth and reconciliation. So I would like to hear from you how you define reconciliation.
I appreciate this question because the word reconciliation is something that everybody wants to define as being one thing, and it's important to recognize that the word and the process of reconciliation means something different. And that we have a lot to draw from in our teachings. And so I want to thank you, Bev, for bringing the wampum and sharing a little bit of that from your perspective. For me, I think there's things that really stand out from that story that connect to the work that I do, which is with young people working cross-culturally to understand the story of colonization here, but also the richness of Indigenous history that was here before colonization happened. And in the video, we learned a little bit about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was here in Canada. And the basis of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was the work and the stories of survivors of Indian residential schools. And through that process, they started to begin to talk about reconciliation as the process of restoring and maintaining healthy relationships. And I think Bev really spoke to that in a deeper way in the teachings from the wampum. And so when I think about reconciliation and in the work that we do with young people, we think about those aspects of restoring relationship. And sometimes when we talk about reconciliation in Canada, we talk about an Indigenous and non-Indigenous relationship. But it's also important to take that back to think about what colonization destroyed the relationships in our own communities, our relationship to our lands, our relationship to our communities, our culture and our languages, our relationship with our spirit and our spirituality. And so when I think about reconciliation, I think about we need to restore those relationships too as we start to build new relationships with all of the people who've come to call Turtle Island and this area home.
Thank you so much. You know, there's lots of different definitions of reconciliation, and I think that's because there's such a wide diversity of Indigenous peoples across Canada. We are not pan-Indigenous. We're not just one homogenous people, and I think that really needs to be clear. I'm a Dene woman, and we have, Haudenosaunee, and then we have Anishinaabe. We have different people from different regions, and we all have our own understandings and relationships with the Crown, with each other, and so on and so forth. And so I think it's really important to understand that. And so moving forward, why has reconciliation become so important to moving towards a more just and sustainable future?
Truth is a big part of why we have reconciliation in the first place. And if I think about the futures that we want to create, they're usually built within a context. Sometimes that's a historical context, the context of the people who create and envision those futures. And so it's really important for us to be able to understand the context from a Canadian perspective of that history, and to think back about the stories and the information that was missing as we were building this country, or as Canada, the colonizers were building this country, and then what that set in motion for who Canada is today. And so context is so important if we're going to be building a different future. We need to be able to see the story from all different angles in order to create something different, to not recreate the patterns that seem to be happening all over the world over years and generations and generations. They look different. The leaders that are leading some of the most evil in this world may have a different platform. Maybe it's Twitter, but it's the recreation of these patterns, because we're not taking time to be able to understand the truth in the context of the world that we're living in. And so to me, reconciliation gives us the opportunity to be able to heal that history and that story, and to create a context for us that is something that is a powerful place to build from.
Thank you. You know, I want to draw on some of the remarks that Chris made as well. You know, he talked a lot about reconciling our relationship with the land. And we often think of the truth and reconciliation process in Canada as reconciling our relationship with the colonizers. Where is that reconciliation with our relationship with the land? Like, why is it so important, not just for us as Indigenous peoples to have, you know, access to healthy lands and ecosystems and our lands and territory, but where is reconciliation and connection to land in respect to all people of Turtle Island?
Ariel was actually in my territory like 2 days ago, teaching us about climate justice from an Indigenous perspective. And so this question gets me thinking about what Chris said when he was talking about 2% of land is stewarded by Indigenous people. In Canada, at one time, there was hundreds of nations that were that had a relationship to, you know, 100% of the lands that is now known as Canada, and now we're down to about 0.02%. And that's as a result of assimilation policies, forced relocations, and genocidal policies of Canada. But the statistic that was really important that Ariel was sharing with us, I think, and you might need to correct me on it, is that globally, Indigenous people are stewarding a significant amount of the biodiversity of the entire world, and that's important.
80%.
80%, sorry, 80%. 30% is not enough. Yes, 80%. And why that is important is because we're actually seeing what is going to become one of our biggest challenges in the future, and it's happening right now, and that's in relationship to our water, in relationship to climate change, and the impacts that we're seeing in the weather and how that's impacting our humanity. And so when I think about reconciliation and that reconciling of a relationship to land, those original instructions that were gifted to us by creation as Indigenous people are also part of what I think will be needed and necessary in order for us to get through this next phase of destruction that we're about to face. And so it's like we need those knowledges, and we need that Indigenous sciences to be respected and acknowledged and upheld in creating solutions for the future around possible climate destruction and devastation, which is happening right now.
Thank you. You know, I think that's a really great segue into the next question, is that, you know, truth and reconciliation in Canada isn't just about telling about the wrongdoings that happened, but it's also about moving forward to reconciling not just our relationships with the colonized and the colonizers, but also our relationship with each other and the land. And there's really great opportunities, but there's also really big challenges. So could you maybe name some really big challenges that exist in the current reconciliation process, but also counter it with some really key opportunities that we should take in this moment?
In the video that you all saw, there was 2 young people that were mentioned in that video. One was Tina Fontaine and one was Colton Boushie. And I think that their stories speak leagues into where we're at in this country in terms of transformative justice for the violence against Indigenous people. And so when reconciliation first began, it did signal a change, that something was going to be different. And I think that Indigenous people were warmed inside and to a certain extent because that there was an acknowledgement of some of the violence that had been perpetrated against us. But over time, we're already seeing the ways in which that this word and the process of reconciliation is being co-opted into something that can be commodified, that only is required of you from 9 to 5. If you have a job that in the description it says work with Indigenous people, that isn't something that you need to do if you don't have funding for it, is only for Indigenous people. The ways in which that we can find loopholes to get out of the process of reconciliation. And I believe that part of this is because we live in a capitalist society, and so we do want to find ways to make reconciliation sexy, to only see reconciliation as something that is possible if there's money behind it. And so I want to name that reconciliation is an industry in Canada, and that is something to be mindful as we want to participate in something that's going to take 150 years. We have to be able to think outside of the cycles of political parties, the cycles of funding that's available to us, and really to think about the ways in which that we need to transform ourselves. And as Bev said, reconciliation is a healing process for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. And to think about what's possible when we do that hard work to heal ourselves, and to understand our stories in relationship to where we come from and the original peoples of the land, no matter where we are living on Mother Earth.
Thank you. So we're down to our last 2 minutes and 40 seconds. No pressure.
You forgot positive things.
No, you talked about how it warmed our spirits. I think, truth and reconciliation in theory has been a really, really good process. We needed to bring these things to light. We just need to be going further than we're going. I think the last question, and you're going to have to make it 1 minute each. If you could tell, we have a lot of people that have come to this parliament that are from all over the world. And a lot of folks haven't known about the history of Canada and the atrocities, and they're learning this for the first time. So is there anything that you would like some of the international guests that are here to take home with them? Something that they can learn from what's going on with the truth and reconciliation process, either good or bad? What's one thing you would like them to take home?
Yeah, I really like that because one of the young women that I had the pleasure of working with used to say, the history and the things that happen to us is not what defines us. And so the takeaways that are important for anyone is to see the richness in what's missing from the conversation because Indigenous people are not at the table. And that there are people who are being excluded from processes of creating the future that we, I think, imagine and know is possible, but can't really quite figure out how to get there. Those answers, I think, rely on people like Indigenous folks in places like Turtle Island, stepping into our gifts and our power and our beauty as distinct peoples, and the connection to the land is an important piece of that, as I've said a whole bunch in this panel. But I wish I had something super sharp and last moment pin drop kind of thing, but I don't. But I thank you for listening and learning more. Truth is important, and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission itself only speaks to Indian residential schools, and there is a lot more history about the lands here and the history of Canada that isn't told. And so be radical explorers of truth, I guess is a thought that I'll leave you with.